on the laptop. So again, thank you. Tonight we're going to have the public informational meeting for the 2022 Street Improvement Project. And I'll begin with some introductions here momentarily. Just a little bit about the format for tonight. What I have is this PowerPoint presentation, which will last maybe about 20 minutes, hopefully no longer than that. I don't want to bore everyone to death with that. And then we'll try to look for just some general questions here, those sorts of questions that might benefit the group as a whole, related thing if there's someone has that. And then after that, if there aren't none, any of those, or if you know, after we exhaust those, then we'll be looking for, we've got some of the plan sets laid out over here. So if you have specific questions about what's happening, you know, at your residence, we have staff here, and I'll go through the introductions, and we'd be more than happy to go through there and answer your individualized questions there, kind of just on a one-on-one over at the side here. As far as those that are here, I'll start with myself. I'm Scott Badun. I'm the Director of Public Works. I also have, if I could get at least a raise a hand over here. For those that are listening to on the recorded, you won't be able to see this, but I got Joe Skabinski, who's our project manager. Joe is the eyes and ears and everything of construction, you know, especially once things begin. You'll be seeing a lot of Joe out and about there. He will most likely be, you know, your first line of communication for any concerns or issues that might arise once construction otherwise starts. Next to him is Greg Shannon. He's the city engineer. He will be assisting Joe with that. He's got more of the office role of design stuff, but he will also be someone else that you can reach out to, and we'll probably see out in the field occasionally there assisting Joe with things there. We also have the utility here. This is a full reconstruction project, so it's not just surface elements, but we'll be tearing up everything that you see and don't see beneath the road and replacing it. We have Joel Lemke, who's the Director of Utilities. Eric Southworth is not here. Unfortunately, he had some sick kids. Craig Schakowsky, who's the Construction and Maintenance Superintendent. And a couple of individuals that you may have seen here entering your home if you had your inspection done. Dan Wojcik is one of them, and Jason Pliska being the other. Dan and Jason are kind of on the utility side, the equivalent of what Joe is for myself. They'll be out there observing the construction that's going, so they're going to be that first, you know, line of communication. You'll see them out there, you know, every day while utilities are being installed. At least one of them do that. You'll also see Craig out there popping out time to time, as well as probably Eric and even Joel, depending upon if certain issues might arise there. Who's not here? Todd Ernster, the city forester. He's generally, you know, very much involved in these. If there are any tree-related issues, whether they're in the right-of-way or on private property, something like that, we always get Todd involved into those. So if anyone has specific tree-related questions, I apologize, Todd's not here tonight, but we can get in touch with him on a different opportunity, and we'll definitely take any of your questions you have and relay those and try to get an answer to you if you have that. And then last but not least, given otherwise the size of this project and the complexity of it, we do have a consultant on board for that, and we do have Patrick Rank here tonight, who is our designer in charge of that. So if you have especially any of the other technical questions related to what's going on, I'm sure Pat would love an opportunity to explain the ins and outs of engineering a project like this. So a little bit on the project description. Again, this is a complete reconstruct. I'll be honest, you know, for a period of time, it's going to look like a war zone out in front there. Just everything tore up. So we're going to be replacing everything on the surface. You know, it's the pavement, the curb, gutter, the sidewalk. You know, everything really right up to your property. So everything in the right of way is pretty much going to get disturbed. One of the things we're looking to accomplish in addition to just replacing the pavement, which I think everyone agrees is in need of some assistance, is just getting up the sidewalk and all the ramps and stuff to ADA compliance. Most of them throughout the area don't meet ADA requirements, so we want to make sure we achieve that. And then in addition, I think several of you have probably been, you know, have experienced some at least occasional, you know, localized flooding, you know, in certain rain events, maybe in the springtime, whatever. So we've been looking to improve some of the drainage issues there in the storm system throughout the area to try to address, you know, any of those perennial historical problems. And then just because of the age of what we otherwise have out there, replacing all the water main and the sanitary sewer as well. One thing I guess I'll go into, and I could talk about here in project sequencing, you know, often comes up, isn't part of our frequently asked questions though, is the installation of all those utilities. And some people say, well, geez, they've been digging for weeks and, you know, they're still here. One thing to think about is that because of the way utilities are otherwise laid and put in, they're going to do one utility, and they're going to come back and do another utility. They're going to come back and do the third utility because they're all at different elevations in different positions. They can't open up the entirety of the road and do them all at once. So once they get started, the contractor is here and gets started, they'll work as quickly as they can, but you're going to see them, they're going to come back, and oftentimes we'll get questions like, well, they already dug up the road, now they're back digging it up again. What's going on? That's exactly what's going on. Because it does take 3 passes essentially to get all the utilities put into place. In fact, they may even come back, depending on how they hook up some of the laterals, there may be some additional work between those major mainline events. A little bit on just the history here and the existing corridors. Excuse me. What we're always looking at, except for one block of Portage between First and Second Street, everything here is otherwise a local road. And that one block being what's considered an arterial road. Those are classifications given to us by the DOT. And the reason I otherwise mention it is, a lot of people will sometimes ask me like, well, geez, how come it's taking so long for my road to otherwise get done, when these other roads here. And oftentimes, not it's the entirety of the answer is that, it kind of relates in this because, the local road is one that basically represents in its greatest utilization is by the residents there. They're not necessarily intended for people to travel. And that's not to say that people don't travel through your neighborhoods, whatnot, but otherwise is often that way. So as we try to prioritize, what we're otherwise doing and how we address things, there's many things that go into it. And many times that becomes one of the more deciding factors of how we address the order of which we do it. Thinking of it as that, like that arterial road, think of all the traffic that passes on Second, that would use that little stretch because that's the one-way stretch that comes here. Thinking of all the traffic that might pass in front of your house. It's that, what is the benefit to the public, necessarily is one of the factors there. So we want to get the ones, we're quicker to get to the ones that impact more the traveling public, than the others. We'd love to get everybody's road done. We have limited funds with which to work, but that's otherwise part of it. So I do like to highlight some of those in what we do. A little bit about the pavement, what you see at the surface. There's probably very little of, I've got 1950s to 80s. Here's kind of what we looked at. It's hard to get all that. I doubt really much of the oldest stuff is there, simply because of the storm utility, which had gone in most cases not too long ago. But one of the reasons that brings us to this area is this PACER rating. The PACER is there, the Pavement Surface Evaluation and Rating, is a system that the state requires that all local units of government use, so that everybody's essentially grading their roads in the same way. So when they're asking for state aids and whatnot, someone isn't, saying, hey, my roads are in terrible shape, but they're maybe a whole lot better than ours. And so they're getting money even though they don't need it as badly as we do. So it's just kind of that rating. It's a scale of 1 to 10. And so at a 2, there's a little bit of useful life in your road yet. I mean, quite honestly, there is. They're not pretty to look at, and they oftentimes don't drive the smoothest anymore. But for the most part, hopefully the asphalt is still intact. It's cracked, I'll give you that much, but hopefully it's still intact. It's not quite a gravel road at this point in time. But if we don't do something with it soon will be. And that's what we're trying to otherwise get to. And this is quite honestly, again, when we're looking at the different road classifications, for most local roads, 2 is really what we're targeting, because that's when we feel we've gotten the most life out of the road. And if we wait too much longer, it's going to truly start to fail, and we're going to have to come in there and do more work just to keep it travelable, and ultimately that just costs everybody money. And then as we go up on some of these classifications like the arterial, typically we don't target anything less than a 3 when we get to those, simply because who's going to even think about riding the bus and or taking transit anymore if your main roads, which are most of those, are so bumpy it's not even worth getting on the bus anymore. So those sorts of thought processes go into these. A little bit on utilities. As you can always see from the screen, most of them are very old. Because Joel, when did the utility actually start as the public utility?
The water utility started in 1922.
So 1922, and I think, yeah, so these are some of this water. I mean, it's probably some of the original stuff that was there when that utility was formed, I'm assuming. So this is some of the oldest that the city has. And the sanitary isn't really much behind that when it was first otherwise installed, and there, much of what we were looking at from the records are in the 30s. As I alluded to earlier, a little bit on the pavement idea is that much of the storm utility went in much later than that, and that's probably where the age, quite honestly, is as far as the records we have, is probably when most of the pavement that you have now was, last put in. So it's considerably old as far as that. A 40-year or so pavement life is a fairly old road. Project limits, from the screen you see that there's two colors. I'm sure you can't read the drawing. This is included, with the letters that I think everyone hopefully received. That's why you're here tonight. One of the things that we've been trying to do, and we've never really known, it's been a very, very odd time the last few years as far as bidding and what pricing and stuff we get and how contractors are able to get to and now add to it, which we had seen more of last year. The supply chain issues related to what contractors can get. So we took a little bit of deviation this year, to instead of trying to figure out what exactly we felt we could get done in a year, and we identified what we'd like to get done and what we would hope we have the money and funding to do, but did break it down into some things to say that, quite honestly, depending upon where the bid prices come in and how much money we have, we may not. So we did need to prioritize what we had. So we asked Patrick to design things. So we said, design it all, but when we go out to bid, we're going to have to make some decisions. So we want you to bid. So the things shown here in red, Portage, Smith, Washington, and that one block of Third, those are the things that we feel very comfortable. I shouldn't otherwise say this. Those are the guarantees. Those are the ones we're going to do. That's the base bid. That's what we're basing on. The idea is shown in green, the remainder of Third and Meadow. So if you're residents on those rooms, like, I can't tell you that today that they're going to get done. We won't know until we see the bid prices and look to see what we otherwise have to see if we can afford it. But we definitely want to include them. One of the nice things that it includes it in this design, because this area is kind of nicely tightly packed, is it ensures we have uniformity of design. So if we can't get it done now, the other nice thing is it's ready to go. So if we can find another opportunity to it, we can just grab it off the shelf if we don't get it done now, and hopefully that'll help us get it out onto the street at a future time. As well as then there isn't the question about how does that tie into what we have and get there. It's just all ready to go. If anyone has questions more about that or wants to talk to someone about the funding, I'd be happy to talk to anybody after we're kind of done with the presentation here. I'll also mention, just because I'm sure it'll probably come up, and as I mentioned, not sure what we can otherwise accomplish in a year. I don't know if everyone is otherwise aware. Last year was a very large project for us, and much of it was, in some sort of, similar driving fashion to this year. Some of it was the flooding issue. So our project from last year was in somewhat, it needed to be as big as it was to accomplish the goals we had. And unfortunately, just due to the issues of trying to get supplies was a big part, as well as some of the actual physical conditions. We ran into more bedrock than we anticipated to get to. The contractor was not able to finish. They are planning, weather permitted, to come back early next month. So in about a month from now, if the weather works out. So I just want everyone to know, it says if you start to see, that's Gerke is the contractor. If you start to see these trucks rolling through, and they will be nearby through your neighbors, they shouldn't be going through streets. You'll get a letter before we start. So you may see them out and about before we're actually getting started. So nobody get nervous if in a month you start to see a contractor mobilize. They're moving, because in fact they even have some of their stuff stored right there on that empty lot there at Portage and Third. So if you start to see a contractor come in and move that, in a month or so, that's this other project going on. And so just so you're otherwise aware, so we don't get anyone nervous saying like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize you guys are getting started. We probably aren't. We're probably going to start a little bit later than that. A little more into the specifics about what we have. We always like to share kind of the typical section. I've only grabbed the one here. What we've tried to do is more so uniform the roads. Some of the roads as they exist right now are a little bit, not a whole lot, maybe a foot or two wider than this one. If anyone's interested in what we're otherwise our final cross section will look like, this actually is what Smith Street is today as far as overall width and stuff. So roughly looking at that, the total right of way, that is, what the public part of it is there from property line to property line, is 50 feet throughout all of these corridors. And so we're trying to come up with a uniform cross section that fits all of those. And that was kind of really the best approach that we always had. So some of the curb to curb distances will shrink just a little bit. But if you're wondering about what it's going to look like as far as the overall width and how it will lay out, Smith Street would be the one to look at, because that's pretty much identical to what it is. Correct, Patrick? That's Smith Street? Okay. And I guess I should even, okay, you're not going, it's not going to let me go back. I guess one of the things we want to do that, and the reason in part to do that is many of the streets, as you're aware, there's not much space, that terrace space between the back of the curb and the sidewalks much. And we've been trying to go throughout the city to try to increase that space in many areas where it doesn't exist right now. One, it creates a friendlier, safer pedestrian environment for people walking. It gives us a place to put snow. It's going to hopefully give more of an area for people to even put out their trash cans. So it has a number of benefits. In many of these cases, just because the right-of-way is that small, and we can talk to Forster Ernster at some point in time, but there may be some small trees that can go in there. Unfortunately, there just isn't enough space to plant larger trees. But I mean, he will work with us on things there. So it provides a benefit on several different issues, as well as even on the stormwater issues related to just get another grass area and reduce the overall pavement. Project schedule. Today, here we are, the public involvement or informational meeting. We're getting ready to get this, wrapped up. We actually met with Patrick today to go through the final plan set. There's a few things that need to be adjusted on there, and we're going to get this out to bid. It looks like after I put this together before we had talked this afternoon, and I was looking at late March to early April, and it looks like we're going to meet that late March time frame. So we'll get those contractor bids then. So probably in the weeks after that, I probably will then have an answer on the third in Meadow for anyone that has that question. What we anticipate is contractor will probably mobilize there sometime in late May. We don't know exactly where they're going to start on the project. That's really kind of up to the contractor. We don't tell them means and methods and everything. I'll get a little bit more on some project sequencing here in another slide or two. Yes, sir.
When will we know as to where and which ends of which streets and so forth start?
Sure. Yeah. I'll just repeat that so I don't know if anyone can hear that on the computer. I don't know if they can hear me yet. We'll find out. But the question was just when will we know where the contractor will start out? And we'll get there. What we have is several weeks after the contract is awarded, we will sit down with them on a pre-construction conference, and the contractor will give us their schedule at that time. And then we will send out letters to everybody, indicating what that is. We'll identify kind of based on their schedule. We'll break up the project in different phases, and we'll send out a map and then a letter indicating what we're anticipating to do, and we will update that depending upon how progress goes. So as weather may impact it or other conditions or any changes that happen, we'll be trying to let everybody know what will be happening as we go along. But as we get closer to it, you will get more information from us. We'll send the letter with that information in it. One of the challenges that we are even going to have this year is we are coordinating with WPS, and unfortunately, just the way the city is able to fund the information to do, because unfortunately, Pat back there doesn't work for free, is to get that contract. But WPS has identified some concerns with theirs for their infrastructure related to their gas service, that they want to upgrade that. So they're trying to piggyback on us because it's of course cheaper for them to work in the road once we've torn it up or in advance of us tearing up, so they don't have to restore it to do that. Unfortunately, the electrical part of it is that they also have some electrical upgrades. That electrical part is ready to go. They'll probably be getting in there. Was it in late May as well? Joe, do you remember? Yeah, so they'll probably be getting out there slightly in advance of our contractor showing up. So you'll start to see, if it's not WPS, they often use a contractor known as Intercon. You may have seen their trucks around. I think they did the gas main on the other side of 2nd Street last year. So they'll be replacing some of the electrical work and all of the gas main throughout this project. The gas, unfortunately, because we still needed to design things that they needed the information for to get there, that's just going for them to design right now. And so most likely that work is going to work concurrently with our contractor, which is not an ideal situation. We like them to get in there, get their stuff done in advance of us. So we're going to try to coordinate as much as we can with our contractor and WPS so that we're not tripping over each other. So we can make sure that, so once we know our contractor schedule, we're going to be sharing that with WPS and see if they can't basically work in streets other than where our contractor is working. And then, we'll have to talk to our contractor about not finishing surface elements until WPS can come in and finish up their work. But I just want to let everyone know there is unfortunately, just the way it is, so, WPS seems to have a lot of work going on themselves right now. And so they are doing the best that they can to get that in, and that's something that's still unknown exactly what impact that will have to our project. But regardless of how we others get to, we feel with this project, it's going to take, the entirety of the construction season to complete. It is a fairly large project. At a minimum, it's a mile. If we get the alternatives in, it's I forget exactly what it was, mile and not quite a half, I think. So it's a big project, but that doesn't mean that you're going to have, construction the whole time there. That's just when we start, to finish, to get there. So that, the contractor won't be working in front of your house for that whole time. Project sequencing. Overall, we do also want to limit there. We can't just let the contractor go to town to do, whatever they want, wherever they want. We unfortunately, only have, one Joe and to do this thing. So we, and he's got to try to keep an eye on things that are going on and whatnot. So we do try to limit it, as well as that could be a considerable disturbance to everybody if they're allowed to do so much. So we will try to work with them and not try to limit them to slow, the progress, but limit them so that we can keep them, working diligently in one area and not dragging out work in multiple areas. The one thing that we do otherwise have within this, as far as contractually, that I can, kind of tell you will essentially happen, is related to that one block of portage from first and then through second, because we don't want to otherwise interfere. And I'm sure you were probably all impacted somewhat by the closure of that same intersection this last summer. So trying to otherwise tie that down. So what we're telling the contractor as part of our contract is you can't start any work in that area until after Riverfront Rendezvous, after Independence Day. And then you have to have that part of the work completed before school resumes, the end of August. So that will give them slightly less than 2 months to which they could possibly, which is more than enough time to, to get that work done, or should be. So we'll get that under. So hopefully it has the least amount of impact to the general traveling public as well. Then I just have a few more slides, I promise. I try to go through a lot of times because I find, even though we sent, and hopefully everyone had an opportunity to read through some of the frequently asked questions, but I like to kind of go through them, and you only put so much of it into a letter to get there, and oftentimes it still may mean some questions. So, the big one, will I be able to access my driveway? And otherwise, where will I park? And the answer to that is, generally speaking, throughout most of the summer, the answer to that is yes. But there will be periods of time when the contractor has a big trench out in front because they're putting in sewer or water, then no. If they're right out there, we just can't let you in. And then the other time that otherwise happens is when they're putting, the concrete. So when they're putting your driveway approach in, and putting the sidewalk in, we need to let them form up, pour the concrete, and the concrete has to cure, and that's, roughly a week's time frame for the concrete component of it. The utility component is going to vary. So I can't tell you exactly what is, they'll put several feet in the ground a day. However, if we do similar to last year, if we do run into some additional rock, that could slow things, up within here. So I can't give everyone a specific, contractor to be in and out at a certain time. But they'll be working through, and even once they go past, so in between passes of utilities, you'll still have access to it, because once they go past, they'll close everything up. You'll be driving over gravel, to get there. So if you're like one of the first streets to be on, the one thing to be prepared of is that you may spend a considerable amount of the summer driving over gravel. And so, we expect, and contact Joe, we'll be working with the contractor to make sure that it's regularly graded and taken care of. But, after a rain event or something like that, it's possible it may wash out very quickly. No one wants to hear the complaints, but I'd rather have people, call us and say, hey, can someone please take care of the road? Then potentially let it, linger. So by all means, if there's a concern or issue with that, let us know. Along the same lines, if anybody, or if you have a neighbor or anything, anybody that has a mobility issue, it's hard, we don't otherwise know, but we definitely ask anybody to, if it's not you, if it's a neighbor, please let us know. We try to work with our contractors as much as we can, and generally contractors are very, good about trying to work with it. We won't be able to, necessarily pave you a way in and out house over time, but we can do various things, and we can definitely work very well with contractors to coordinate activities as much as possible to get there and let you know when there may be an issue. So yeah, by all means, yes, please do. If you know some of your neighbors, I mean, I hear that way, have them, that individual, or if you can just call or email us at Public Works. We definitely like to do that and work with them. The further out that we know about it, the easier it is we can tell our contractor or coordinate with them on that, because we realize that this is going to be a disturbance for everybody. We hope in the end it's worth it. Certain people though are affected more than others, simply because if you can't park in your driveway and you do have to walk, it's often over uneven ground, and for some people that's truly a challenge. Regarding as far as parking, as I have on the slide here, we will open up parking, so there will be on adjacent streets as close as we can get to. We'll lift any overnight parking restrictions and stuff, so you will be able to park hopefully as nearby. If you can't get into your driveway, hopefully you'll be able to park nearby.
Well,
yes, sir.
There's a public lot at the end of Briggs Court, adjacent to the high-rise property. So is that going to be available for parking for residents?
It could be, and we'll have to look at it as long as it doesn't create an issue. The question is the public parking lot at the end of Briggs Street, for those listening to the recording. And it's something we can definitely look into, as well as there's the what's called Lot 8, which is the area that the contractors now at the end of 3rd Street, the center point right across the street, as potentially another opportunity for people that may be there. So we're going to look at some of those. So in addition to on-street parking, if we can utilize some of those areas and free them up, we'll see what we can do.
What about our garbage cans?
I'm going to get to that. We'll talk about that. Pick it up like that. We'll come right inside the house and clean out your trash. So another one of the big questions that will impact most people is special assessments. And so we do have a plan. I know, Joel, did you want to talk a little bit more about what we have planned here as far as utility stuff? Because we will be, and we're putting things together now. I do actually have the initial estimate of assessments. So if anyone has a question related to that, I don't know them offhand, but I do have something I can refer back to, because we will be doing some stormwater improvements.
So on all of the utilities, we'll just talk about, since we're on this, your sewer and water will be replaced. That isn't anything that's being assessed. They exist currently, and in order to work around them efficiently, we need to take them out and put them back. So there'll be no charge there to the homeowner. On the storm lateral side, where they don't exist currently, which is most of the project, that is going in. New infrastructure does get assessed. That's how this works. And so that'll be something where we go through the process of a preliminary resolution, we get the bids, final resolution, and it will be levied as an assessment against the property. The estimate there that you'll see on the preliminary resolution is going to be high, somewhere in the $2,600 range. But we do that because we can't go back and rewrite that. So in the projects over the years, we've seen those anywhere as high as that, but that was because there was very few of them on that project. And typically, if there's very little of a certain item on a project, the price for that item goes up. So on this project, there's a lot of it. We've seen them as low as $800. So somewhere in that range is where you can expect to find them. I think the preliminary assessment number is $2,650.
$2,650, correct.
So that's what'll be in the paperwork, but I fully expect that it'll be less than that, and we only bill the actual cost. And it's equalized also. If you're on the long side of the street, you don't pay more than somebody on the short side of the street if the storm surge is closer to you. So, yeah.
Right. A few more questions. So one of it related to what will happen to utilities. The contractor will set up temporary water while they're putting in the new water main. So there'll be a very, very brief, if at all, notice that is happening. And then contractor is typically just going to work through on the sanitary side of that and just others capture it. So there shouldn't be any sort of real interruption. You'll be notified about the water when they're transitioning there. You should be notified there. If there's an issue related to the sanitary, if a contractor involves it, we'll be coordinating with them, and those individual properties that we feel will be impacted by that will be notified. but typically you don't even notice it as they go through and do construction. Contractors are well set up to do this sort of work.
To that end, I just wanted to add that if you see an interruption in service that isn't really brief, call us, because things can happen that we don't always know about. A piece of equipment could hit something and we don't know it. So don't go a day, don't go overnight without water thinking that it's part of the construction project. Give the water department a call and we'll come out and make sure that it's taken care of. Interruptions should be brief. And even if you're curious about a brief interruption, give us a call. The gentleman standing up in the back there, Jason, is going to be the guy on site inspecting for us on the utility side, so you can always track him down out on site too.
I guess, what about like Charter? Because Charter comes across the street into our house and we work from home, so internet is a little important.
Sure. Yeah. The question is regarding Charter or other utilities, and from our perspective, our country, they're otherwise told to just leave those alone. There's really no reason we should get into that. And so if there is any sort of interruption related to that, that would most likely be simply because we did accidentally hit it, and it's going to be out and we'll have to make that, repair, contact them, make that repair. Or if it's going to be something more coordinated, it's going to be probably in conjunction with WPS's work. So if they're changing poles or doing this, or they're adjusting anything that may pertain to that, that would be something more so through them. We should not be impacting anything of that sort. So, any of your internet services should not go out. If it does just, totally unbeknownst, it very likely is because something wasn't, marked properly and a contractor, just hit it. And yes, by all means, let us know. We'll work with the contractor. We'll get a hold of or call directly to that utility if it's Charter or TDS or whatever. And, even check with them if there's any sort of expected outage. And then we'll get that repaired, work with the contractor to get it repaired right away. Yes, sir.
That was my question. A lot of the new TDS is either in the boulevard or within the city's legal 1 foot of the sidewalk, or like I say, in the boulevard. So is the contractor and so forth going to be aware of where those are and to be mindful, careful, and not rip the hell out of them?
Well, yeah, I mean, they very much should be, because they're, the contractor otherwise is responsible for paying for those repairs if they are, and any of that fiber repair is very expensive to do. It's very specialized to do that. I have to say, I understand that the problems have been fixed, but I can't say that I've been demonstrated to it, because I'll be honest, last year we had a number of issues related to TDS because the Diggers hotline, somewhere there was information lost through there and they weren't marking all of the TDS, and our contractor was hitting it, and they did it several times. I understand that they've been working through that issue, but I cannot promise you that that issue is fully resolved, I guess, until we get out there. So that is something to be aware of. I know we work diligently with TDS, directly, with them, last year to try to mitigate that. And I said, I do understand that they were working with Diggers Hotline to get it corrected, but I think it's probably worth, Joe, you want to make a note that we call and talk to Dennis there and see about that? Any other questions related to utilities? Then I'll get on to the next one, which has also been a very interesting one lately, is mail delivery. We don't anticipate that there's going to be an interruption mail, and I did need to clarify that, as I've written down here, is that it is possible that if the contractor is working directly in front of your house and the mail carrier at his or her discretion doesn't feel that it's safe to deliver it to your house today, they may pass by. And we don't consider that, nor does the mail delivery, an interruption to service. It's just a condition of the day, and they will bring your mail back the very next day they're able to and feel safe delivering it.
Promise?
That's what I can't promise, because that's the Postal Service.
The mail service right now is kind of
And
sporadic, and
already,
if
yes.
we're expecting bills or other important information, and because of your construction that delays it, I guess I would really like some kind of assurance or.
And the reality is that
I understand your
right.
position, but you understand ours.
Oh, I definitely do. And we work with them, and if it's and we often even ask the question, because we're generally more than willing to work with our contractor to set up temporary mailboxes if it works best for everybody to get their mail. Oftentimes the Postal Service they will tell us they don't see a need for it. And sometimes they do surprise us, but we do get that, and we will get some concerns. If your mail isn't delivered in a certain day, and if we do need to put up temporary mailboxes, we'll notify everybody and let you know where they'll be, and we'll take care of all that as far as the setting and stuff and the numbering of the boxes and everything. So you'll get that. But if we're not using temporary mailboxes, and yes, if your mail isn't getting delivered, the unfortunate thing is that's something you have to you can definitely call us and let us know, but that is a postal service issue, and we can't force them to deliver the mail if they're telling us they're not going to. Typically, working with them in that respect, they have been, reasonable to work with. Whether they're actually still delivering everybody's mail, those are two different things, unfortunately.
I can,
Yes, sir.
I can talk to that a little bit. I retired from the post office, but I still have friends there now. And
For your service.
Yes, thank you very much. I know they're very short.
Every day they tell me, the one person I talk to tells me every day they're at least 4 or 5 carriers short.
I think that's minimal.
Yeah.
And they don't have anybody to deliver that.
Yeah, I know, and they try and hire people and they don't wanna work, they quit
They're
after a
working
week.
12 hours a day as it is. And one thing that
Only some of them.
I just couldn't believe when I heard it, postmaster is out delivering mail.
Oh, he delivers packages or
Yeah.
whatever, but don't bother talking to him, because his attitude is
Oh, yeah.
extremely
Well, it was like that when I was-
ridiculous and poor.
Part-time job, Steve?
No, I wouldn't work for that man.
But
We would have big butts.
a lot of them are getting burned out, because they work so much.
So,
Thank you.
next question that I have, I see I'm already, I don't know why I ever say 20 minutes. I don't think I've ever done this presentation in 20 minutes. I try for 20 minutes, but this is about right, I guess, on par. So the question was garbage and recycling. So throughout much of the summer, for the majority of people, it'll really be unaltered. When construction is actually going on in front of your house, so the contractor's actively working there, we will otherwise be changing things up. We haven't come up with a better system. If anybody has a different idea, there's always just a lot of man hours to go through to get that otherwise done. Because once they're constructing, the problem is we just can't get our automated trucks, in and amongst all the construction activity. So what we'll otherwise be doing is working with city staff as well as our contractor to still collect on your day. However, what we'll be asking you to do is just change the procedure, and we'll document this in a letter when it's your term. Again, we'll put it in that phasing stuff, let you know what the schedule is, and then let people know what they need to do relative to their garbage and recycling. So we just be asking people to still on your same collection day, just put your garbage and recycling into clear bags and just put it out as close to the right of way, the front of probably to the street as you can, and either the city or the contractor will come and pick it up. Now, it's also not uncommon, if the contractor's doing it, most often we do work with the contractor to do that. If they otherwise miss it, you can contact Joe, he'll contact the contractor, someone will come and get it. Yes, sir.
Okay, now, if that's the case, we have to purchase clear bags. Used to be we had bags, so forth. Those were food and whatever with the new system. I guess my initial reaction is I'm a cheap son of a bitch and I have a problem spending money for something for a summer that, depending on the amount I have to buy, et cetera.
So,
I would suggest maybe if that's gonna be the case, the city should put that.
Here, buy some bags.
yeah, I think it's a reasonable.
Well, if I can buy more than a half of one for $1, I will.
Right.
Just burn it in your wood stove.
I know what you're saying, but, we often see it along the same, similar lines. We also don't come shovel your sidewalk. We don't mow the terrace space in your front. Those are things that continuously cost property owners your money. Yes, it's others inconvenience. We'd like to think that the benefit you're getting, even for myself, I like to think, well, it may be a disruption to what is getting here. When you think of how your tax dollars are otherwise being used, there are some people that are going to pay a whole lifetime of taxes here and never see the benefit of getting the sort of payback on their taxes like you're getting right now by the infrastructure in front of your house to get replaced. And I'd like to think that there's some benefit, there to be. I realize that is otherwise an inconvenience, but so, yes, ma'am.
You aren't widening the street, are you at all?
No, if anything, depending where you live, we'll be slightly narrowing the paved area there to give you more room between the sidewalk and the curb. And nothing's going, so where the sidewalks are today is essentially, I mean, some just be there, they won't be coming necessarily closer to your house.
And my other question, I think, maybe, I didn't hear what he was asking. The parking lot across from the high rise, would that be available?
Potentially, we're gonna look into that, and we'll be sending out, when we get closer to construction, you know, we'll include that in a letter as far as where acceptable parking areas will be, but we'll be looking into that potential. Moving on with the questions here, if you have anything in the right of way, so if you have anything, you know, basically in front of the sidewalk, you know, much of the area, there is not room really to have it, but some people surprise us and do have irrigation either maybe directly behind the sidewalk or even in front. A few people we've discovered actually have, you know, private electrical running through there to power, I don't know what, but they have it there, or maybe you have a pet fence, an invisible fence or something like that. If it's within the right of way, we do ask people to move it. So when we send the letter, that will have a reminder in that as we get closer to ask people to remove it. It simply becomes, you know, too costly. You know, even if you mark it, you know, and think nicely, oh, if I let the contractor know, you know, it's here, hopefully they'll be nice. You know, it really becomes too costly, and it's not fair to everybody else. If we have a contractor trying to be very careful how they're dealing with their, you know, they've got big equipment, you know, we want to be able to utilize it for what it can do and get the work done as quickly as possible. So if it does remain in there, you know, we're going to just tell our contractor to go through, undo it. You know, if something is damaged, you know, now if it's on your private property and it's damaged, there's a different issue. But if it's in the public right of way and it's damaged, you know, we're not going to repair or replace it. So just so everyone's kind of is otherwise warned, I know that doesn't make some people, you know, very happy because there are a lot of people, especially in different parts of the area, that do have irrigation systems and they do spend a lot of money on them, and then they got to pull them back to reinstall them, and they don't like that expense. But unfortunately, we just can't pay for everybody's private utilities that are within the right of way. You know, we do try to be nice in that fact. We often don't, you know, force people to otherwise put them back. We will often let people put them back in, although really by ordinance, they're not even supposed to be there. Just a couple more, I promise you. So questions often come up about trees. In this particular area, there's not as much, you know, much for trees that are within the public right of way, but there may be some that are in close to the right of way, like immediately behind the sidewalk. And we will do the best we can. We'll work with Todd Ernster, the forester, you know, and our contractor to see what we can do to work around that. And there are many, many examples of us working around trees throughout the city. If you look at anything probably done in at least the last, you know, 10 years, you'll often see sidewalk and other things, you know, where they don't go straight. We do veer things around there where we can. Sometimes it's otherwise inevitable to meet our goals to get there, do that. We can't work around it without damaging the roots of the tree oftentimes. And if that's the case, you know, we will notify you as the property owner, the resident, and let you know whatever's happening and coordinate with you that if a tree in that case we feel is damaged and can't be saved, you know, to be taken down, that will be a city expense. We wouldn't ask you to remove a tree that is your tree that, you know, we're causing the issue. But we try to minimize that as much as possible, and we will always get the forester involved with that. So it's not going to be a decision that I make myself, and understandably so. To get there, I don't want anyone to just say, well, what do you care about trees? You know, you just want your road again. You designed it, you want to build it. So we get the person who truly loves trees to get involved with that, to try to tell me what's the better way to do things. And I think it works very, very well. Another common question, since we're going to have work there, you know, a lot of times people see it's a great time to, you know, put in a new private side lateral to your house or replace, you know, your driveway. I wouldn't disagree with that. You know, however, you know, as the city, we can't do that. So you can't call us and say, hey, while you're there, can you just have our contractor repave my driveway? You know, we can't do that. We don't have a means to keep track of that and bill individuals for that and administer the contract for that. You are more than welcome, once we identify our contractor, to contact them and see if they're willing to take on that work. Some do, some don't. It just kind of depends too, like how busy they are and kind of what their policies are. You know, if it's especially any of the utility related stuff, I'd actually suggest contacting one of the local plumbers, you know, now, to make sure you can get on their list so that they're aware of the work and they can identify what the work is, and then we can coordinate with you on when that work is getting done, so it's done at the appropriate time. And most of the plumbers and stuff will work with that, you know, ahead of time and work with you to coordinate that with us. So they're generally very, very good with that. So I'll go with you, ma'am, first.
I have a concrete driveway, and they would be replacing then the part, because that would be part of the sidewalk, wouldn't it?
For that,
Whatever they would take out, they would replace.
correct, yeah, the question is here for what comes out. So yeah, anything that comes out, we will replace. And, there will be some of you, depending upon your driveway, that we probably will approach, just based on, we do the best to design within there. Sometimes we don't like what we see in the end. You might have a driveway that's, already, fairly steep towards the road. And the only way we can get our stuff working is it might steepen up. We might approach you and say, we can put it back in this way. This is what it's going to look like. If you'll allow us to do it, we'll cut back in your driveway a little bit farther and we'll get it and we'll be happier as well because it's going to work better for us. But yeah, if we remove it as part of the project, we will put it back.
Okay.
So, sir?
I have two questions.
Yes.
The first one has to do with the reconnecting of the laterals. It sounds like that could actually be 3 separate events, one for each lateral. Where my plumber, I'm gonna have a plumber come in and replace the laterals. Do the connections all happen at once, or is it 3 separate events when those 3 laterals are reconnected?
Well, it's unlikely that you're using 3 currently.
No, I only have
Yeah,
2 right now.
Yeah, water, sewer, and they'll get, as the utilities go through, they'll get connected separately. Now, the difference is, on the water side, they make the connection, but you're still on your temporary water for a little while because we need to do some testing, pressure testing, backpiece handling, stuff like that. And you'll be fully aware of when your water gets reconnected likely. You should never know that you have an interruption of service on the sewer side. You'll never be aware of that if everything goes right.
Okay.
So they do happen a little separately, but you shouldn't be aware of the sanitary sewer.
You can have them both in place at the
Same
same
time.
time, if that's your question.
Well, that was part of my question.
On your side,
Yeah.
And how does this get scheduled? Do you work with my plumber so that I'm not miscommunicating, or do I need to take communication from the city
it'd be
contractor and pass it on to my plumber?
it'd be really advantageous for you to let your plumber know the project's going on, and then, to do it in coordination with makes a lot of sense. We'll have it open up so they can actually see where they need to come to and connect to, and oftentimes they can even leave that part of the hole open to make it easier for your contractor to come through. So I would say keep a close eye on things and catch somebody on site when you see the equipment getting closer. But if you're gonna coordinate with a contractor, let them know, hey, when I know it's getting close, I'll let you know, and you can coordinate with Jason or Craig, either one, and try to get a rough idea on when the best time will be there.
All right, if you're.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, feel free to, feel free to, either me or somebody else go and you can work with whoever, the plumber is. He completed work with us a lot, so he knows the ins and outs, so. Okay.
And that brings me to the last question I always have. Then we'll otherwise break away from the presentation. But who is responsible for restoration after the project is complete? And this is always a very difficult question because, you likely have, very well established, if you just do, lawn, the contractor's gonna come, they're gonna plant it, so we'll put in the topsoil, they'll fertilize it, they'll seed it. We'll be using an EMAT, most likely to keep it there. However, that we'll be asking residents to, basically take ownership of it at that point in time. Now, mind you, if it just doesn't come back, do that. Our contractor will be back in the spring. We'll have them touch up things. Because it can be very difficult to do that. We can't rely on the contractor to come in and properly water it all the time. It gets too costly to think that we can do that and too difficult to do that remotely. So we're asking everyone to water. As we get into construction, we'll be sending some tips on how to take care of that as far as watering and if you're much into lawn care, fertilizing if you so desire, as well as kind of a mowing schedule and stuff to help with that. We often find the majority of the time when lawn doesn't otherwise take care and a resident has an issue related to it, it really is the fact that the property owner, the tenant, didn't do anything about it. They otherwise let it grow, and I can show you lots of examples of how that was. Basically neighbors, one watered a couple times a day, mowed eventually when it got taller, and one just complained that the weeds, coming up and there's nothing there. Well, I'll tell you what, the first thing you are going to see after they plant it is weeds. That's just inevitable. That's what goes. But the thing is, if you let it grow a little bit and you mow it, honestly, it takes about 2 or 3 seasons to really truly establish your lawn. So it's nearly even not fair to tell the contractor to come back next year and redo it if it hasn't been given that couple of years to do that. But we do find a little bit of care will otherwise go a long way, relative to that. And we'll be able to, you can talk to Joe. Joe has almost gotten a PhD in this as much as he's had to deal with these sorts of issues because they all happen at the very end of the project. But even with that said, we do, try to pay attention to what's going on too, because if for whatever reason we get to the end of the project and things are maybe a little bit later than we want them to be, we will still have a contractor seed late into the year. We realize that if you are one of those individuals, you probably was seeded late in the year, it's much less likely in the spring that it's going to come up. If there's just no time for it, it may just come up and then it freezes, and really it is that, and that's an environment we'll come back to. We're not going to see that. We are aware of that, but if the restoration is happening, say the end of August sort of thing, if you're lucky enough, if you're on the first part of the project, you get there, there's been more enough time to water it, to mow it, to get it established such that when winter sets in, it should make it through the winter, and come back very, very well. So we do ask for a little bit of help there. Like I said, we'll be sending out some, information as we get there with some otherwise, guidelines. We've been working with local landscapers to try to put together a condensed package to otherwise help us out with some instructions on that to help, landowners to deal with that, newly seeded portion of the lawn during the care for it. Yes, ma'am.
Aren't you talking mostly about the boulevard part?
Yes, yes.
Because that would be the most that would be
Correct.
torn out.
Correct, yes, that area
My
between the sidewalk and curb.
understanding is that you would kind of expect us to water it and take care of it.
Yes,
Isn't that true?
correct.
Because I know I asked for 2 trees to be planted when we lost them. We like trees,
Yes.
But probably as you work, you'll lose those on that piece of land. But I don't see if you're changing the road that much, or the street, that there would be that much damage to people's lawns.
No, I mean, to the lawns, there really shouldn't be.
Right.
It'll be very limited areas if ever we need to get into someone's lawn. It is just really that area between the sidewalk and the road, that narrow part. But some people don't want to take over it until it's established, and unfortunately, the city just can't establish a lawn for people.
Trees, though, won't we, now, 'cause they aren't on our property.
Yeah, the trees will most likely come out. There is a possibility. We'll look at them in the field to see if it's possible to work around. Most likely they won't be. If you have trees, we'll work with the forester, and we'll get you new trees. So, and if you don't have trees now and you see the space and you want to talk with the forester about possibly getting trees, we do that. And we'll get you on a planting list for the future. So, and that's the end of the presentation. I think within the letter we had some of the numbers there, but by all means, if there's questions to follow after this, or at any time throughout the construction, by all means, just reach out to us. That's what we're here for. We'd be happy to even meet out with you. It's probably that we don't try to shy away from those things. That's probably hopefully the number one thing that we provide is customer service. So if you do have an issue to come out there, we may not be able to give you everything you ask for and want, but we will definitely listen to you and consider it. So,
and then for neighbors that couldn't be here, what FAST will be.
Yeah, so this is something new I'm trying otherwise here. So recording this, hopefully the audio took here, and then this presentation with the audio will be on the website. And if they have any further questions, like I said, we'll meet with individuals